Right, hello everyone. Welcome to Managing Resources in Azure. I am, well, as you can see, Russell Seymour. I work for Chef, one of the principal engineers. I'll say now that this presentation doesn't have any Chef in it at all. It's all about managing resources in Azure. I've been working, technically I've been working for Chef for 3 years, but I actually joined Chef on the 29th of February 2016, so my yearly anniversary is next year. Before Chef, I was a consultant, and before that, I worked as a third-line support manager for UK ISP. By all means, take photos if you want to of the slides of things, but I do have a gist set up at the end with the QR code and a bit.ly link so that you can just put it up and see the links and commands. I'll say now that some of them are wrong and I haven't put all of them in yet, but it will be a live gist, so if you keep hold of it, I'll just keep updating it. So, just a short summary of the stuff we're going to go through. So, how do you manage resources in Azure? The greatest strength is also its weakness. You give, and this is true of any cloud platform. You give people access to it. How do you manage the cost and the most expensive part, which is compute across whether it's Azure, AWS, GCP, or anything like that? And I'm sure some of you feel these methods when the bill gets too large. I know as Chef sometimes it's like, you're running too much. You need to start shutting stuff down. Infrastructure team, a friend of mine works as a contractor for a company in the UK, and although Azure is infrastructure as code, they're not allowed to build the infrastructure. So they have to wait for a team to build it, and then they come along and they need to change a firewall or the network range or something, and they have to go back to the infrastructure team. So they haven't benefited from the cloud, they're just still using the cloud as physical boxes. Gut feeling, well, my machine's been running too long, I need to shut it down or whatever. Or third-party software, there's things out there that run this for you. I'm sure you guys have other methods or have come across it. So for these reasons, I wrote the Azure Reaper. So what this does is manages the lifecycle of a resource group. And it can also manage the operating time, the times that virtual machines in that resource group can run. Now, Microsoft have launched, and in Azure, if you have ever seen it, you've got auto shutdown, which you can set at night. The problem with that is that it doesn't start up again. So if you've got people working on it or you need some jobs running, you can't run it. You have to then come up with your own automation to start those machines again. So this gets around that, so you can have a working day, and by default, the working day is 8 till 6 in your time zone. And it will shut down on Monday to Friday. So if the machine isn't running after 8 o'clock, it'll start it, and if it's running after 6 o'clock, it'll stop it. So you can manage your cost that way. So the machine's always available, but in downtimes, it's not. And it will run across multiple subscriptions. So you can launch it in one subscription. You tell it what other subscriptions to monitor and one it's in, and it will go off and it will look at everything in those machines, in those subscriptions and resources. So the features of the Reaper. There's a bunch of base settings that you load in to what is actually a Cosmos DB in Azure, and it uses that for its storage. You can have tag overrides for some of the settings. So, for example, if, like this week, if you were doing a demo and you stood up the environment and you wanted to make sure that it wasn't touched by the Reaper, you can set an in-use tag, and if the Reaper sees that tag, it goes, OK, I'll back off, I'm not touching that. You can also change certain things like the time zone. So, as I say there, it's time zone aware. The database has also got a mapping of the locations of Microsoft data centers to its time zone. So if you're running in that and you haven't set a time zone on a resource group, it respects those times. So 8 o'clock in the morning here is not 8 o'clock in the morning in the UK. But you can adjust that time zone. So if you have launched in the UK and you're working here, for example, then you can adjust the time zone so it addresses that. So it's time zone aware. As I said, resource groups and VMs can be exempted through the in-use flag. Slack notifications. So when your resource group is going to be reaped or your machine's going to be shut down, you'll get a notification. The default length for a resource group is 7 days. There is a notification delay system in there so that you only get notified about an impending delete of your resource group once in the 24 hours beforehand. And if your VMs are about to be shut down in an hour's time, then it only runs it once, or you only get notification an hour before, because the Reaper runs every 10 minutes on a timer. So you don't want to get bombarded with these things. There's a user filter. So at the moment, so when you're deploying this out, you can say, right, if you come across any resource groups with this person, so for me, for testing, I've got it set to just me. So even though my colleagues might have resource groups that are tagged with their name, which I'll come on to in a minute, I'm the only one that's getting notifications for my resource groups. So it's just to help ease the demo stuff. There's a dry run mode. By that means that you've got a destroy flag and a manage VM flag. By default, when you deploy this, they're both set to false. So it doesn't actually damage anything, but you get all the things about notifications and what's going to happen, and it will tell you in that notification those things are happening. And as I said before, there's support for multiple subscriptions. Now, how it works. One of the unfortunate things about resource groups is that they don't carry any metadata at all. As you can see, I created this resource group, and other than the name and its provisioning state, there's absolutely nothing useful in there. I started this off by using an Azure policy to ensure that certain tags were applied to resource group. I thought, yeah, you fixed it. Except then Microsoft brought out AKS. And AKS creates another resource group for all the AKS resources. And it blew up because it wasn't adding the tags that AKS needed. So people were going, oh, I can't deploy AKS. So I had to get rid of that idea. So what I do as part of the deployment is actually I deploy an Azure monitor alert. And its filter is to say whenever a resource group gets created. And when that resource group gets created, it puts onto a queue, which one of my functions picks up. And that information, when you get that information from the Azure monitor, has who created it, when it was created, and the name of that resource group. So the tagger function comes along and goes, right, okay, I've got the subscription. Am I monitoring that subscription? Yes, I am. Find the resource group and put the 3 default tags on it. So that's how we get around the fact that resource groups don't have any metadata on them. Now, the slight problem with that is it's not immediate. I have had situations where, and I'm hoping today it works when I show you the demo, that it takes seconds. But sometimes I've had it take 2 or 3 hours for the monitor to come through into the queue because my functions are queue triggered. So whilst it can be slow, it tends to be the alert coming from the activity monitor. So that was the first hurdle to get around. Sorry, and I've talked about the Azure monitoring alerts. Jumped ahead of myself there. Okay, so there are 3 functions that come part of the Azure Reaper. There is the tagger, which I've been talking about. The queue gets triggered. You get Azure alert, new resource groups created, put on the queue, and the tagger function picks that up. And that creates 3 tags. The owner, which is me, Russell Seymour, my email, which is associated with the subscription, which is rseymour@chef.io, and the created date in UTC. Everything is worked out in UTC, and then it does the conversion to the correct time zone when it needs to do all the calculations. The email address is not required by anything in Azure, but that's for the Slack notifications. So there is an assumption that we use Okta for our logins, and which go through to Google, and we sign into Slack with our Google accounts, which is chef.io, and that's how we get into Azure as well. So there is an assumption that what you're signing into Azure is the same one as Slack. So we use the email address from there, to look up the ID in Slack to send that person an email message. The second function is how the Reaper works. Now, the Reaper itself is timer triggered, and it's by default, I don't think you can change it at the moment, is run every 10 minutes. And it goes through and it reads, it gets a list of all the resource groups in that subscription that it's looking at and looks at each one in turn. And it says, right, okay, am I in use? Yes, well, I'll skip it. If I'm not, am I expired? So I need to be deleted, in which case it will delete the RG. If it's not expired, it will then go in and get all the VMs out of that resource group and determine if they should be running or not, and those ones, and then it will start and stop them based on the time of day. So it's a timer trigger. And the third function is essentially the operations API. So this is how you push in your settings and how you can update all the things and bits and pieces that are coming out. And this is its core. So that's an API into the settings. Slack notifications. As I said before, you can run in dry run mode. And here on these, you can see that the top it's saying your resource group is expired and would be deleted, but the Reaper's not running in destructive mode. And you can see here that my Reaper test 01 wouldn't have been stopped because it's in non-managed VM mode. So you can deploy this without worrying about, and people will get notifications when nothing's actually happening. And that's what the email address and the user filter are for. As I said before, it's assumed that you log in with the same email address. Tags. Now, owners need to be able to manage some of the tags that are applied to, that override some of the settings. Yes, I know that operations will have certain things that can't be overridden, but as an owner, you know that your resource group is needed for a demonstration or whatever you need it, or a certain period of time. And these are the ones that can be set at the moment. And you've got created date, owner, and owner email. Yeah, you can play around with them. There's nothing stopping you playing with the tags. But if you play it and put it into someone else's email address, well, you're not going to get notifications of shutdowns or deletions or anything like that. So yes, you can play with it, but why would you? Days of the week, what days the virtual machines are permitted to run on. By default is Monday to Friday, but you can change that. The in-use tag we talked about. Start-stop time. Start and stop time of the machine is done as a range. So in that case, if I'd set that run from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. As simple as that. And then the time zone. If I wanted the resource group to work outside of the time zone of the data center it's in, I just set the Central Standard Time, which is the Windows name for Central. So you have to use that. So in London, you could use British time, not British Summer Time, because that obviously changes the hour. But you can set the times. There's an extra tag that I put in because I wanted the demo working that's not in here. Again, for testing, you can put another tag on called Reaper Alert, set it to any value, and regardless of the settings, you can see that you're getting alerts from the Reaper. And that's just to allow that your token and everything is set up in the Slack. Obviously, to use the Slack notifications, you need to set up an app in Slack. You need the key, the token that is generated from creating that app in Slack, and you have to put that in the database as well as the URL that the base URL for your specific organization, so that notifications come through. So, pray to the demagogues. I did actually have a nice graphic in here, but I didn't get permission in time to use it, so I had to rip it out. So now I've got this right there. So, hopefully, we can get to a point where I can show you how this is working. So, can people see that now, or is it still no bigger? That better? Everyone see that? Okay. So, what I'm going to show you is just a group. So if I do group create, And of course, the universal can't type while anyone's looking at you, let alone 50 people in a room. So, oops. Okay. So obviously that'll go off and create. Obviously, because it's Azure, it doesn't matter what I'm using, whether I'm on Windows using the AZ command. I could easily have used the PowerShell command because it's got nothing to do with my local laptop. Azure and the functions are doing all this work. So hopefully, if I now go, now, depending on how quick the Azure monitor has fired and gone into the queue, you can still see it still hasn't done it. And as I say, I'm really hoping that it doesn't take 3 hours that I've seen it take before, because that damages my live demo. I'll have another look. No. Okay, we can come back to that, and I'll show you it working, and cross fingers, it will. So what you can also do, the whole of the, although you've got the Reaper running on a timer, and I will show you the results of that, you can also call the Reaper through the API, which again is useful for testing. So let me make that bigger. Is that good enough for everyone? Yeah? Okay. So what I can do here, oops, not that one, is, let's try it again while I'm in that window. Yay! So I haven't had to do anything, and you can see that it's been tagged on UTC at, well, 17:09, and that's come from, or 9:17, sorry. That's come from the Azure monitoring, my name, and the my owner email address. So I can, if we wanted to, using either the portal or the or VS Code, we can start streaming the logs, and we can see the connected log stream. Now the timer is running, so in a minute, as long as this works, every 10 minutes, we'll see the tagger the Reaper coming through, and you'll see all the options. Now all of the messages you see here are object-based, and they are being sent to Application Insights. And the idea being that you can then start running queries through to see what's being reaped, what's being tagged, all that sort of stuff. So the whole point is it's an object that can be searched on. And here we can see that it's checking everything, what things have tags, who's a member of the group, all that sort of stuff. So you can see that coming through. Now, on the demo machine, when I'm working on this, I don't always want this to run every 10 minutes across the 54 resource groups that are in the subscription. So what you can do is, as long as I can remember the command, is you, and people that have used, people who use Azure functions will know that you have the code that comes out the function, which is what you pass in on the URI on the token. And again, I might well change that to something a bit more secure, OAuth or something, but to get this going. And this is, here I'm pulling back. I know I'm jumping around, but this is here. If I run this, you'll see that the settings have come out saying that I'm the only one that can receive notifications at the moment. If I set that to null, everyone will get them. So that's just a filter. So if we want to, I could say, fine, I'm happy. I've disabled my timer, and I can actually go Reaper RJS CC19 breakout 3, and what you should see in the VS Code window at the bottom. I'm looking at the wrong. I beg your pardon. I'm looking at the wrong function because what I've hit is the ops function. Which, if I'm, let's do stop timing on that, stop streaming logs there, and we do it on the ops function. And that's, again, just for testing, so you can go, right, okay, I don't want to run the timer, I just want to check these resource group. So that's that. And then, what am I doing now? The alert tag, and what you'll see is I'm getting loads of notifications at the moment about, I've got my group, RJS tag 01, which I set up is in the UK time zone. So in the UK, it's 20 past 10, which is outside of the 6 o'clock shutoff. So it's telling me that it would stop RJS tag lin 01, but I'm in non-destructive mode, so it's not actually going to shut anything down. I do still have a number of bugs, which I apologize for, because RSeam or CR, it's got a bad date in it, and I know it's tagged with the right date because I checked it before. And the one that we've just created, it's saying, okay, the expiry date is that, and it shouldn't just be sending out random Slack notifications, and I haven't got the Reaper alert tag on there. They're minor things compared to where I was on Saturday, and I really didn't want to do this talk yesterday, but it's working a lot better than it was. And then, again, I was showing you some of the settings. So you can see it beginning to come together, and the Reaper functions, yeah, so there's still quite a lot of work to do there. Now, going back to the slides, how's it deployed? Well, as we said this morning, this is open source. There are two repositories. The first repository is the Azure Reaper under GitHub Partners. Oh, sorry, github.com/chefpartners. And the Azure Reaper is just the code. It's the managed code that gets deployed. I'm using the CI/CD functions, or deployment method within Azure Functions, and it's tagged by default to the release branch of that repo. So if you deployed and connected to this, you would pick up all of our updates automatically through them. Obviously, as both are open source and you have your own requirements and you want to make your own fixes and changes, by all means fork and link it up in the same way, but you will get things that way. The second repo is the Azure Reaper deployment, or deploy, which has got all the ARM templates that do all that work for you. They are nested, so you have to publish them to, if you're not going to use them out of GitHub, you have to publish them to some public location for Azure to pick it up. I do have, and I'm testing an NPM module, which does all that bundling for you and pushes it up to blob storage with a public access. So you don't have to have it in GitHub, so that's really useful for deployment as well. So there's a short link, but as I said, I've got a gist link at the end. Now, I am keen on documentation, and to the point where if someone gives me some code, I want to know how it works, and I try and be a good citizen and write back. So all the code is in with in the repo of that the documentation lives with the code. So there are two repos. It's done using Jekyll, so that it can be run out of GitHub pages. Also, when you look at the READMEs, and I'm not sure if they're up to date, but READMEs, there is a Docker command that shows you how you can run it on your local machine. So if you clone it and want to update documentation. So here is the Reaper, the deployment example, and there's the code example, so where you got your settings and the tags. So I apologize, I've probably gone through this a bit quickly, but I'm hoping there'll be some questions at the end. So what's next? I want to have a settings UI. It's all very well having a nice API, but it's not terribly friendly for updating settings, especially if someone updating those settings isn't the techie. So I've been playing around. I subscribe to Medium, and there was an interesting article the other day about how you can use React. So I went through that, and I thought, oh, that might be quite nice for creating a UI. So I started playing around with that. The idea behind that is that that would then become part of the code, or I might even create it as a separate repo, but the deployment templates would deploy that into an Azure website, use a API link back to what you've deployed, and then you get a nice UI protected by OAuth or something like that. I'd like to put together a two-way bot in Slack. So if Slack is notifying you too much, or you wanted to change a tag on the group to in use, then you could write back to the bot and it would update your resource group for you. Or if you wanted to put like a snooze or something on there, so I could see a two-way bot being useful. Individual base settings. So everyone is subjected to the same base settings. So if you rolled things out to a large company, that might not work. So I'm toying with the idea of individual base settings or group-based settings so that you could have different organizations in your company using on different things. And it might even be that some of the Reaper functions could start working on the size of machines. So if someone launches, I don't know, a DS3 V8 or whatever, that's too big, so it will immediately reap it and then re-provision one with the biggest machine that it could, or something like that. So it could become more of a management and quotary type thing as well. Scaling, although it can support multiple subscriptions, it's only one function. Yes, it's threaded, but the timer only runs and it pulls in the resource groups and then iterates around each one in turn. Now, as I've got the threads there, I might be able to start farming them out, but at the moment it's very sequential. So whilst there is the benefit for supporting multiple subscriptions, I haven't actually done much testing of that, and I suspect it starts following it and taking longer than 10 minutes to do all the reaping. So that's some bits. I will show you an example of something in a minute. Fix a couple of issues. As I was saying, the notification delays are there to give you persistence. It's running every 10 minutes. You don't want it to be notifying you every 10 minutes. So there's another setting store or another collection in the Cosmos DB for notification delay, and it says, right, okay, I've just notified this person about this resource group on this day or this time, and it will shut up for 24 hours or whatever time you set in the settings, and the same for but it's working, but not quite. The other interesting one is when you use a service principal name, so with Test Kitchen or Terraform or anything like that, you don't get a name that it can work with as the user ID on the message that comes through from the activity monitor. So if I just switch back quickly, I can show you that. So if I go to resource groups, I hope Firefox has the same Control Plus to make it bigger. Yay! So you can see here, these kitchen resource groups, which I used this morning for the demo, they've got a new email tag of a GUID, which is the object ID of the SPN. So what I need to try and do is work out how we can tag SPNs through to a user so that those kitchen groups or anything that's done by a third party through an SPN start being tagged with the same stuff as well. I haven't worked out how I'm going to do that yet because I don't know how you can link object them. I know that an SPN knows who created it, and maybe I can use that link to bring it through, but that needs to be fixed as well. So here is QR code and my bit.ly link for my gist. By means, as I say, it's not as rich as I wanted it yet, but keep it, I won't delete it, and I'll be updating it. For this, I'll probably incorporate in the documentation at some point as well. So thank you. Short and sweet, but that might get people back on track. If there's any questions at all, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, of course. There you go. Anything else? Can I just add, do people think this would be something that's useful? Yeah? Has anyone been trying to do something like this before and didn't know how to do it? It took me a long time to find this pattern where you use the monitor alert. Yeah, mate.
Blazor?
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 No.
So Microsoft's new UI?
No, I haven't.
So,
I'll give that a look.
Yeah.
Hadn't heard of that. But yeah, I'm part of the solutions engineering team, And Joshua Timberman has been bugging Davey to get something working in Azure to reap. This has also been built in a way, although it's hosted in Azure, there is no reason why it couldn't, as long as you give it the rules, why it couldn't reap anything else. Just give it the access so you could manage all sorts of things. So yeah, we're quite pleased with it. We want to try and deploy it in a couple of weeks to start managing our cost. So yeah. Yeah, mate.
Even though the resources that are created within SBN aren't tagged correctly, can you still force the Reaper to clean those out even if they don't have an owner? I only ask because we have like a bunch of like kitchen instances that get created.
Yeah.
Sometimes those get stale if someone ran them from their workstation.
Yeah, as long as...
And if they have the word kitchen in them, I know they're pretty safe to delete.
Yeah, I mean, they do have it. They are being tagged correctly with the created date. So I'd have to review the code, because I can't remember off the top of my head, about whether, if it hasn't got an owner, whether it assumes that it can't delete it because it doesn't know who to notify.
Right.
But it might be that I could have a setting for that says, okay, you've got a create date, no owner, but don't worry about it, just delete it sort of thing. And then and it might be like, I'm thinking on my head, but we might be able to have an orphaned like setting that says, okay, you've been orphaned for 14 days, just go away. So that is perfectly, yeah. It won't do it at the moment,
Okay.
but that wouldn't be hard to put in.
Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So in your example, the owner is on the resource group level. So let's say I have a resource group and have a bunch of VMs in there, and each VM has a different owner. So I want notification to like talk to a different owner when everything happens to the VM. So is that something the Reaper can do?
I honestly can't remember if I made it that the VMs can have their own owner email. I know certain things have. So one thing I didn't mention, you can have a time zone set on the resource group, but you can also have a different time zone set on the VM. And the VM time zone will override the one on the resource group. Now, I don't know if I did that with the owner email for notifications, but there's no reason why I couldn't.
Okay.
So that you would be able to have different notifications on different VMs.
Okay, cool.
And the same goes with permitted days and start times on VMs. You can have them on a different setting to the resource group.
All right, thank you.
No worries. Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Cheers.